Being a part of the community is a huge thing, especially when we're talking about Springdale schools. I love volunteering. Me and my mom, we volunteer to translate for Marshallese. I want to stay here and pour back into the community because growing up, the community gave so much to me and my growth as a child. This is such a great community for just Springdale in general. It's a great place to raise your family. I am Anna Norris, and I'm a portrait of a Springdale graduate.
Hi, welcome to Springdale Today. My name's Mary Jordan. I'm your host. Joining us today is Helen Tyson Middle School instructional facilitator, Jean Hill, who's going to be sharing with us about her experience in the 2024 Rural Experience in America, which she's been doing with her students in quite a really intensive, in-depth process. I'm really looking forward to this conversation with you today. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, Mary. I can't wait to just jump right into our conversation today.
Okay, well, let's do that then,
Okay.
right? Help me understand a little bit. What is an instructional facilitator?
Certainly. So in Springdale, I would say we have the opportunity to have instructional facilitators in most of our buildings. And an instructional facilitator serves as a coach of teachers, but I would also say of students, because anytime that we're doing work with teachers, it automatically affects students. So I think of the position kind of like a special teams coach would be in athletics. I get to coach the special teams of teachers and students, really thinking about student achievement and accelerating learning, not only in my building, but across the district.
That's a really fun analogy.
Yes.
And have you been with Springdale Schools for a long time?
I have. This is my 6th year serving as an instructional facilitator at Helen Tyson Middle School. And prior to that, I taught middle-level English at Sonora Middle School, just down the road. I've been in the district about a decade now.
Oh, wow. We're very lucky to have you. Now, what can you tell me about how you became involved with the Rural Experience in America?
Certainly. So that's kind of a funny story, Mary. I was relaxing one evening, just scrolling through, seeing what was out there on the internet for professional development, and I saw this advertisement for Rural Experience in America, and I saw the Library of Congress logo at the bottom. I thought, all right, this looks pretty legit. I'll throw my name in the hat, just to learn more, I thought. It turns out I was applying for a multifaceted learning experience and had the privilege that I was accepted year one. This has, of course, been a 3-year project. And through this experience, have had the opportunity to really understand what is the rural experience in America through multiple different lenses, historians, and perspectives from around the United States.
Well, we're having this conversation from the city of Springdale. Can you help us understand what rural means and how it applies to our community?
I think that is such a huge question. At the launch of the Rural Experience in America project, I sat down with historians, teachers, teacher leaders from around the U.S. to grapple with that very question, because there's so many right answers of what is rural. Sometimes it's based on numbers and census. Sometimes it's based on geographical features. Sometimes we have what I would call rural hybrid communities. And I think Springdale can fall into that category, because when I talk to people who aren't from Springdale, I explain to them our rich and robust history, the importance of agriculture, even now in our city. And also the reality, as one guest speaker I talked to last week said, you all have cows in town. I said, yes, we do. And so in many ways, we're a once very rural city that has some urban elements, but still keeps that flair of what we would think of as classically rural, with agriculture, with some of our features, and even sometimes the way we do life. I think of our rodeo feature that is so prominent to our city, that is historically and most commonly thought of as a very rural activity, but here in Springdale, that is an event that unites us annually.
Well, and how many Helen Tyson students actually participated in the project?
So I had to go back and count, because I've been at this project for 3 years, and I thought of all of the classes that had at least a touch point in this project. And I would say Spanning the 3-year project, it's over 500 students have put their hands on this project in one way or another. I also want to acknowledge the contributions of our community leaders and families in that project. And so if I start thinking about those numbers, I would say we're probably knocking on the door of 600, 700 plus folks have put their hands on this project, and we aren't done yet. So I'm very excited about thinking about the magnitude of this project in the 3-year span.
Have there been different themes as it's progressed?
Absolutely. For my particular project, I had the opportunity to really work with community partners to name out the emphasis of the project each year. And so for the first year, we thought about transformational voices of a growing region, really thinking about whose voices have impacted the region and really the city of Springdale as we know it today. Thinking about those voices and really amplifying key leaders, the second year we narrowed that focus to really think about the voice of home in our region and in our city, and amplified those kitchen table conversations or the conversations we have just in daily life and some of the themes and symbols that are so important and near and dear to our hearts. As we get ready to wrap up this third year, this year we've really looked at the celebration of community, knowing that our community is so diverse and multifaceted and multilingual, and each of those contributions that we all bring to our community are so very important and really need a safe time and space to be celebrated and amplified, recognizing that our community looks very different than it did 40 years ago, but our future is so bright and so optimistic and really changes each and every day as our community continues to grow.
How did community partners factor into the experience for your students?
Community partners from the very beginning have been an asset to the success of this project. I think back to the very beginning of the project when I realized, I get to do a project and I get a little bit of grant money to help support this. I reached out to everyone I could think of. I asked my colleagues, I asked community members that I knew, I asked my neighbors who would be good for this kind of project. And I am so thankful to where those conversations led me. I would say one of our key community partners has been the Shiloh Museum of Ozark History. They are a longstanding partner for all 3 years, as well as the University of Arkansas's Pryor Center for Oral and Visual History. And I've really got to thank Marcia Lay, our community liaison and really partnership advocate, for helping to connect me with so many organizations and leaders. And she has been one of my biggest cheerleaders along the way. And I am very thankful to Springdale Public Schools for having a position that she fills and all of the work that she does, but also recognizing her expertise of our community, having served here for so many years.
She really is a neat lady. I agree with you.
Yes.
Now, why those particular partners? Why Shiloh and why the University of Arkansas?
Well, first I wanted partners that really amplified and honored local experiences. And so I could have looked far and wide, but I wanted something close to the city of Springdale and also reputable organizations where I knew whatever we could produce, that these organizations would honor and respect the artifacts produced out of this project and would be able to house them for longer than perhaps my lifetime or my service in Springdale Public Schools. And so both of those organizations were very willing to do that and continue to be willing to help us preserve all of the history that we are collecting in this process.
And what did the kids learn about sort of how Springdale and our community was shaped from our partners?
They learned so very much. In addition to local partners, students also explored collections in the Library of Congress to really question what exists about our community, both locally and nationally, and what holes in history can we help fill as student historians. I would say most importantly, students learned that the past was more similar to the present than they expected. And I would say the same for me than I expected. As we looked across artifacts and continue that research, I'm always excited when students say, oh, I have something like that in my home, or this looks familiar to me. Thinking about all of the artifacts that we've looked through, a classic image of the Great Festival in Tontitown sticks out in my mind. And working with one group of students, a student said, oh, well, that looks very similar to where I sat at the Great Festival this year to eat my spaghetti. And I thought that's so rare in so many communities, where a student almost 100 years later can look at a picture and say, hey, some things haven't changed so much, and I still get to make the same kind of history. I think it was also eye-opening for our students to realize some of the opportunities we have to capture history of their lives, history of the lives of their families. Some growing up in our community and some joining our community through all kinds of different opportunities. And I think that was exciting for kids to see that they have a seat at the table as a student historian, and that their stories matter, their history matters, and their community partners in our area who want to preserve the history our students and our families bring to Springdale.
Well, I shared with you before we started that I'm kind of a history nerd, and there's generally no better way to compile history than first-person accounts. So our students are serving the roles as historians there. Thank you for facilitating that for them.
It's truly an honor.
We're here today with Jean Hill, an instructional facilitator with Helen Tyson Middle School, and we're chatting about her and her students' experience, the 2024 Rural Experience in America. Part of it, the conversation, was determining particular areas of significance within Springdale that factored into the history and shaping of the area. What areas did the students kind of focus on?
So I found that students focused mainly on places that were meaningful to them first. When I think of historic places in Springdale, I think of classic Emmett Avenue. I think of the Tyson Farm. But I was so surprised that students named places like the park and the Jones Center, and a place in our building where they do a lot of creative work. And so I think that opened my eyes as a historian to realize that history is so personalized, and thinking about how to share place-based historical inquiry with others. So often, I think adults make those decisions about what is important to share with students. And through this project, I've had the opportunity and continue to have the opportunity to think about what matters to the youthful voices of our community, and how can students help facilitate student-to-student inquiry in a way that is meaningful to them and in a way that will help even our youngest historians grow and really think about places of historical significance in our community that we may not have considered previously.
One of the descriptions I saw about the program that you wrote was multimodal. What does that mean?
So for my 3-year project, multimodal has taken on a variety of forms. First, we started recording some oral history in conversations just like you and I are having, with some of our major community leaders from diverse backgrounds. And with those conversations, oral histories, we work with students to trim those and really create a student-friendly podcast series using those interviews. So those interviews were facilitated by adults, but then students put their lenses on it. So it really thought about kind of audio media there. In the second year, with the emphasis on voices of home, students really, I would say, put their hands on the project through artistic genius. One group of students and one of our art educators took the theme of that project into what has now become the art of cooking of Helen Tyson. And so this art educator and I worked with students to collect food history and recipes that were important to their family. Student created artistic renderings of those recipes in some mini magnets, as well as some, I would say, dessert plate type artistic creations and sculptures. Students also sketched those images of those recipes, documented them, and added a reflective piece, thinking about how is this recipe important to myself and my family. And all of those were collected into a cookbook last year that students published. Students are continuing with that project this year, and I anticipate it's going to be an annual opportunity for our student artists. Additionally, another educator looked at this through the lens of really the story of Arkansas in Springdale and beyond. And so students studied the work of Ruth Asawa, who was unfortunately interned at a Japanese internment camp here in Arkansas. And students had the opportunity to use her inspiration to create original artwork around experiences of home, experiences that other people may have experienced in a version of home, in internment situations in Arkansas. And then also students created some individual reflective writings, putting themselves in, I would say, in the kinds of thinking and the kinds of reflective practices that an individual might have experienced as part of the internment process, really thinking about what is so beloved in my home that I must take it with me if I were to embark on a journey to somewhere else. And for some of our students, they brought that history along with them in these writings. After these reflective pieces were drafted, students then transferred them by hand onto sheets of muslin that students this year and community partners are embroidering over to amplify particular words and particular phrases that really resonate this idea of voices of home. And so it's a powerful project to think about layers of student history in this work, student writers, student textile artists, and those will be displayed in our upcoming community opportunity at Helen Tyson and beyond. Our goal for all of this is to create some portable public history presentations that can be shared throughout our communities and schools and civic organizations.
To that end, I understand there's place-based history inquiry boxes that the students have made or are going to make?
Yes. So all of the work that we have done, we're working very closely with our community partners at the Shiloh Museum of Ozark History to create some portable learning opportunities, as I mentioned. And so this work around letters and reflection and writing is going to be paired with some reflections from Springdale-based primary sources that will involve a performative element with costumes and really amplifying the voice of our primary sources. That will be boxed together in a box with instructions, alignment to standards that could be taken to any social studies or I would say literacy classroom or youth organization or adult organization for that matter, to allow our history to become portable. But I would also say that these boxes are dynamic boxes. So as we continue to capture history, these will continue to be built and modified, and we welcome the community to contribute to them as they are out and about. So it is truly a box of living history, if you will, celebrating our past and capturing history in real time to collect primary sources of the moment that others can enjoy in the future.
Okay, knowing that the community can participate in it, where might they find these boxes if they were interested in contributing?
Certainly. So these boxes, as I mentioned, are in the process of being put together. Right now, the plan is to house them out of the Shiloh Museum of Ozark History, recognizing that this particular organization not only serves our county and our city, but neighboring counties and cities, with the hope that these boxes, once in circulation, I know the Shiloh Museum already offers similar learning opportunities, can be checked out by anyone in our region, and can be celebrated And I think one of the goals here is to even do some comparative work across our region of, if this is a box of inquiry around Springdale, what could a box of inquiry around Berryville look like? And so in the building of these boxes, the hope is to not have everything Washington County and Springdale based, but to expand this work to neighboring educators and neighboring counties so that we can hold a repository of place-based, portable, multimodal inquiry boxes for the entire region to enjoy and to be celebrated.
This just sounds like a ridiculously fulfilling experience.
Absolutely.
Is there anyone or any stories that have particularly been meaningful for you as you've been going through this process?
There have been countless. One that comes to mind is an oral history interview that we did with one of our great leaders here in Springdale, who is now an educator with the Springdale schools. And this individual talked about the first time she came to the United States, the first time she came to Springdale, and what it was like to order fast food. And that's something that I think so many of us take for granted. Oh, yes, we go to wherever we go and we order what we order. And until that moment, I didn't really think about what a unique experience that is for our area and for speakers of English versus speakers who are learning English. I also think about a very touching moment in this process when we ask students to create visual images of home as part of this multimodal experience. And these images are in the process of we're taking them, we're scanning them and putting them on transfer paper to transfer them onto the muslin and embroider around them, of course, to amplify them. Some will be presented as is because they are so fragile. And one individual represented the passing of a family member in this image and how important this family member and their legacy still is in this individual's experience. And it's one thing to see that from an adult lens, but when I'm sitting in a studio with a student and they're having a very adult conversation about this contribution, it makes me realize that we have so many untold stories. We have so much rich history in our area that needs to be captured, because I'm not sure that student's story would have been amplified in that way without the offering of this experience and really the openness to represent home in a way that is meaningful to each and every individual.
Well, and these students are in middle school. What do you hope that they're going to take away from this as they move forward in their scholastic opportunities, their life?
Certainly. My greatest hope is that students see themselves as historians and as contributors to not only our local story, but our national story. And I also hope that students never stop engaging in historical inquiry, even if that is within their own families, within their own life, within their own community, wherever that may be. And I think that through this project, students have had the opportunity to engage in historical research both locally, nationally, and internationally, to help them understand the intersections of history and voice across places, across repositories. And they've also learned what's out there. Resources like the Library of Congress, Smithsonian, our local collections, many of which are now digitized for student access wherever they may find themselves. And even running into students who are now out of Helen Tyson and on to other campuses, students are still talking about their contributions to this project. And so I am hopeful that as this continues, that students will continue to remember the lessons that they've learned and be able to apply those in whatever learning endeavors they find themselves. And thanks to our partners at the Shiloh Museum, even though this year is year 3 officially with the project with the National Council for History Education and Library of Congress, we plan to extend these efforts beyond the confines of the project for as long as we can sustain it, to continue to grow student historians and really foster historical inquiry throughout our area.
And so much of our conversation has been about the students benefiting, but I'm curious of how you personally, what you personally discovered through this experience and learned, maybe something you weren't expecting?
I've learned so many things. I think I could continue this conversation well into the day, thinking about lessons learned. But one of the most important lessons that I'm still processing out of this whole experience is how well and how knowledgeable our students can be as historians. I've known this for many years. I've worked with students all of my career in some facet or another, but I am increasingly pleased at how students conduct themselves as researchers, as individuals collecting history. When we're engaging with the project, I see an amplified level of respect for student self, for the history that we're researching or collecting in that moment, respect for others, communities, different languages. And it really blows me away because I think our students have a lot to teach our community, both here and around the world. And I only hope that as students continue, however their educational journey may unfold, that they realize the importance of their voice as collectors and makers of history.
That is just so neat. I'm so grateful that you got to have this experience, that you were able to come and share it with us today. What's next for the students and you? What the next steps in the program for you?
So our immediate next steps are, of course, to work on some culminating experiences for this project. And as I mentioned, many of those will be highlighted in April at Helen Tyson Middle School's Community and Culture Night. But beyond that, I get the opportunity to amplify our students' work by sharing a couple of sessions at the National Council for History Education Conference in March. And I cannot wait to bring our student work to a global audience and hopefully inspire others to engage in similar projects wherever they may find themselves as historians, as teachers, as researchers. And additionally, our next step with the Shiloh Museum includes continuing this work and working creatively to think about how do we foster authentic historical inquiry in our region in a way that can inspire others to do the same, which was the whole point of the initial work of the Rural Experience in America project, to really engage students and community members in community civics through historical inquiry. And I am so honored to have been a part of that and to continue my partnership with the National Council for History Education, Library of Congress, and others who have supported this work.
Are there any other aspects about the project and working with the students that I'm not considering that you think are important to really share with listeners?
I think it is important to know that all 3 years of this project, I not only had local support, but support around the country from lead historians, researchers, of course, the Library of Congress, and many others who I unfortunately don't have time to name in this setting, that helped us think through logistical components of this work, research elements. I worked with some top researchers in oral history around the country to do a deep dive into what exists here. How does the work that we're doing connect with other places? And this past summer, had the opportunity to go to the Library of Congress and sit at the table face to face with many of these contributors and share the work that I'm doing. And Angie Albright, the director of the Shiloh Museum, was able to attend with me. And we are both still in conversation with many of these key supporters and will continue to beyond the time of this project. And I think it's so important for anyone doing this kind of work to remember that your village has no limits, and it can never hurt to ask. And really, you never know who will get involved with the work that you're doing and how this work may expand in places that you can't even fathom in that moment. And so I'm just very grateful for everyone who continues to speak wisdom into the work that we're doing. Some of the things that have come to life out of this project, I could have never dreamed without that community and academic collaboration.
That's very exciting. And I hope as you continue to work on the project and things continue to come to fruition, students continue to create, that you'll share it with us. We'd love to continue to follow you and what they're doing in whatever capacity we can continue to share that for you.
Certainly, I'll be glad to do so. Thank you for the invitation.
And thank you for being here with us today. We are so grateful, and we really appreciate your sharing yours and your students' story.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us today on Springdale Today. I'm your host, Mary Jordan, and I look forward to chatting with you next time.
Springdale Today is a production of Springdale Public Schools Communication Office.
The podcast is hosted by Mary Jordan and is produced and edited by Micah DeLacy.
Be sure to subscribe to Springdale Today for free on your favorite podcast platform.
And don't forget to follow Springdale Today on social media for episode updates and behind-the-scenes conversations.
Thank you for listening. We hope you'll join us in the future
as we continue to learn about the amazing stories happening in Springdale today.